Good evening. Thanks for coming out. It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you here this evening. Our next event in the landscape series will be Tuesday in a couple of weeks on the 24th of March in Stubbins at noon. Our own Sonia Dumpelman and John Beardsley discussing their recent book, Women and Modernity in Landscape Architecture. Please join us for that. As you may know, the GSD is home to a small and growing cluster of aerophiles, airport enthusiasts. There are at least a couple of pilots in the audience. I know several of us here have book-length projects dealing with the airport as a subject. Last academic year, in fact, with Sonia Dumpelman's help, we co-convened and co-curated the airport landscape project, looking at the airport as a site to think about as and for landscape architecture. In that context, it struck us as interesting to take a moment and circle back in a way to the origins of the airport as a work of architecture. And so in that context, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our two speakers. First, Alastair Gordon is a noted cultural historian and author. He has authored and edited and published on a range of subjects attendant to architecture and design. You know him from his extensive print work in criticism in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. Most recently, he's been named architecture critic of the Miami Herald. I first came to know Alastair's work as author of this now 10-year-old volume, Naked Airport, which I think has stood the test of time very well. I think it's been quite durable as what it promises, a cultural history of the building type in question. And it's something that I think many of you interested in the topic have come to understand, that the airport is most often approached as a technical space. More often than not, it's resigned to simply questions of engineering, maybe questions of efficiency and process. More recently, however, a range of people have revisited the airport as a site of culture, as Alastair's book does quite handsomely. In that regard, we thought it would be interesting to invite Alastair to come and engage as a kind of interlocutor, a critic and a public intellectual with Paul Andreu. We're very pleased to welcome Paul Andreu. Lovely to have you here. Perhaps more so than any other architect practicing in the world today, Paul Andreu has shaped the face of modern aviation. It's also not always the case here in Piper that we get to welcome an architect whose buildings almost all of you have experienced. I was thinking about that the other day when I was preparing my introduction. How rare is it that, because often we'll have speakers come and distinguished architects talking about their work built, and how few of us have actually experienced those buildings. And for those of you that have somehow escaped a Paul Andreu airport, you clearly have been in airports that have been influenced in one way or the other by Paul Andreu's work over the course of the last 5 decades, beginning in 1967 with a precocious commission for Terminal 1 of what became Charles de Gaulle. Paul Andreu has gone on to really shape the face of aviation internationally. He's received, through his practice, almost every conceivable recognition that an architect can receive in France. He has also gone on to produce really quite notable works in other typologies of buildings. Along the way, his work has been exhibited and published internationally. He's also, interestingly, maintained an ongoing commitment to teaching. It's a real pleasure to have Paul Andreu.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, my only problem is I'm too long, always too long. So I try to speed. And if I don't, my wife is there controlling me. So if you see one arm moving like that, it's my wife. Okay, so let's go first. Let me not forget how this works. Yes. Okay. Flying, a dream. Let's go a little bit for the origin, otherwise we don't understand anything. I mean, you see that too beautiful guy is going to jump, his father is equipping him. It turns bad, very bad. That dream was not ready to come true. Some of the technique went much smoother. you could have animal help, and it could even begin, Pegasus, of course, could become something to kill each other. So that was the first destination of aviation. But of course, I mean, the real grass, the real efficiency was with the gods, not with and Hermès, which is not only a fashionable trademark, but a god with these very little wings there, and some here, would do all the job efficiently. And I mean, the story of airports is that man and machines and a god business. Okay, the machine is there, ready to act in any field. Any clearing would be sufficient. It's true there were competitors, not so safe. Zeppelin, very efficient planes landing on the water, but I mean, if you don't have a water, then you cannot have a machine. That was perfect. After the war, we got the Super Constellation. I mean, it's branded Air France, but as you know, it's not fabricated in France. So, safety, speed, okay. Evolution, you will see that all the time, as I told you, the god of commerce was the strongest. I found that one day. It's such a tremendous title. World Airport. Aéroport mondial. You see many runways, many taxiways all around. And this is for the passengers. A few years after, less runways, more for the passengers. Some years after, and that is all the story. I mean, the machine has to serve, and the real business is having the passenger go in the plane and travel. And that will... What did I do? So, at that moment, okay, we can begin the last 50 years, a story of the airport. Well, three items. We cannot cover everything, and I try to, once again, to go fast. Airport in the city, airport as a landscape, airport as architecture. Airport as the city, well, it's very clear. It's a place of exchange. Any city needs an airport. A port can be a city. Any city has an airport, even if it's very difficult to build. And second idea, it's serving, but it's a pollution. And that's the very first thing. There must be a kind of pact between the town and the airport at the very beginning to be successful. Very, very fast, Montreal. A first airport here. Then they had the idea, okay, we go beyond anything. We had no noise on the town. And they make Mirabel. Mirabel is now shut. No traffic. This is Tokyo. Same thing, same story, but a little bit more successful. They had that airport here, right in the middle of the city, Haneda, and they said, okay, we go all the way there, 80 kilometers from the town, no noise, nothing, but they had a quarrel with the farmers for 20 years, and at the end, I mean, this airport is not loved at all by. There was never that pact between the town and the airport. But that's the two examples. Most of the time, there is one. Let's look how the business and the evolution of the airport in one city. I mean, this is Paris. Paris, historically, three airports, one after the other. The first one, Le Bourget, before the war. Le Bourget is one-sided. I mean, not many, not one runway here, another one there. This is not used. The towns come to here. There's a limit between the airport and the town. It's a clear linear limit. But you don't make much traffic with that. So immediately after, you remember the drawings of the Mondial Airport. Well, of course, it grew all the way. There's the terminal area is there. Basically, there are two runways, but there's a kind of inheritage that you will find everywhere of so many clumsy runways. And the third stage. So that was in the Orly was in the 60s, and that one, Charles de Gaulle, conceived in the 70s. Well, it becomes the airport of everywhere, parallel runway, in the middle the terminals and the services. It's completely cut from the environment. It's a kind of island, in fact, in the environment. Roads on the two sides if you can. That's the typical airport you will find now almost everywhere. So let's take some examples of that. Of course, Le Bourget. Dubai. Such a nice city with palms. I mean, it's really inside the town and one side. You see the town around. There's a road there, and the terminals are packed there, and two runways here. It's the most important heritage of a linear terminal on one side. Oh, that one, Las Vegas, is a little bit like that too. They have added things, but it's a little bit. But you can see in heritage of a multi-directional runways, Orly, of course, but that's also the kind of thing we find in Schiphol. Runways, and then you see, as in Orly, as in many that we shall see after, the terminal zone become a kind of kernel inside the 2 or 3 runways, but only one access. San Francisco is typically the same, exactly. Runways, 2 runways, one city size, airside, and a limit in the middle. Chicago, curiously, has a number of runways. Difficult to understand how they can manage all that. But again, the terminal it has been reshaped all over. But I mean, my first visit for 45 years ago, it was already that kind of design, which was changed. New York, you see, all those inherited from that. And of this type, well, you have a lot of the most modern and airport. Dallas was one of the very first to have this, but also Denver, but also Munich, with a system very peculiar in Munich because it's reduced to the minimum in the distance between the runway, and the roads are parallel to the runway. And it's a little bit, in a way, the memory of the Houston organization by Rolf and Gondemann. Singapore, it's the same, or crowded along a green area, and Jakarta, and Munich, and Berlin, which is I think the last one. You see, always that system. It becomes, it's not a bore, it's a necessity. It has to be parallel, and the plane doesn't mind. I mean, before, why these runways? Because there was side winds, and the plane would not like to with these big wings. They don't suffer so much Shanghai-Pudong was the same, except they hurried to make the 4 runways. By the way, there's a project in Dubai of extension with 6 runways, but it's the Gulf. Not sure it's so useful, but making islands in the city, some people thought well that why don't you put them in the sea, real islands? So that's Seoul. That's a way to have the noise and everything apart. That is Seoul, with this organization, always the same, but as not an island. How do you call that? A presqu'île. Of course, there is this example of Kansai Airport, right in the sea. And with the 2 islands, I will come back to that. And there's Hong Kong, where they took an island and flat it to get a place for construction. And with 2 runways, and the possibility maybe of some others, but a huge capacity like this. Of course, you cannot speak of the airport and the city without mentioning, even rapidly, the connections with the city by train or road is not enough in most cases. And also, the airports are becoming multimodal platforms, really. I mean, the first one in Europe, at least, to have done that is Frankfurt. A terminal here, a regional train here, so that all the region, linear on the river, is accessible by this train to the airport. That was in Europe at least the first well known. Well, this one back to Hong Kong. I mean, it's also a very good design of a terminal, of a railway connecting to downtown, even allowing checking in downtown, and a terminal right organized. And by the same, I mean Foster, the Beijing terminal, it's not a regional train there. It's only the metro, but it comes right in the middle of a terminal with a very short distance to go in between. We have done in Charles de Gaulle something which is one step more, in a way. It was not at all forecast. It was inserted in the project of a terminal number 2. But we have here a mixed railway station with high-speed train connecting even to London and Brussels and all the main towns in France, and also side by side the metro. And they are thinking, I'm no longer involved, they're thinking of another connection, fast connection to Paris. So that in fact, here, you could even come from Brussels by the train and change here. It's really multimodal. But the best I know in the world is that one in Shanghai-Hongqiao, which is the airport for China. I mean, basically the domestic traffic, but China is so big that domestic traffic extends. Longer. So, and you have there side-by-side terminal, metro, train, and then that is a real, if I remember well, 13 lines of. So you have the train coming from Beijing arrives here, but also all the regional trains. So the very high-speed train, the rapid trains for all the region are there, and they share really. It's a really multimodal platform, and I think it's the more evoluted in the world. And sometimes, I mean, you have to create the site. You don't have enough site, so you make it. It's two examples I worked for and didn't go, but you know, that was I'll take some time to explain. There was an island. To extend it for the second runway, you had to build another island. It's very deep in the sea, 20 meters at least, so it settles 8 meters. So the first has already settled, and then you build the second one. And in the first one, there was some suffering because of the light parts and the heavy parts would not settle exactly the same, so it's a headache for the engineers, etc. So the first idea of the engineers was, of course, not to connect the two islands, to let them free. Let 200 meters free between them. And now we had some thoughts with my Japanese colleagues of what kind of terminal we would do. Of course, there's a train there. There are roads. Duplicate those would be an expense and also a problem each time because so I came with the idea that we could make a terminal in a port somewhere as a platform, bring it there as the terminal, as the heavy terminal, floating, not exactly floating, I mean ballasted. They would use the same road, the same train in a very short distance. And here would be only light structure, so they could settle otherwise. So you just need a kind of joint between. And, I mean, I don't know if they'll do it. Now the crisis in Japan have washed out the project for a while. So I don't know what they ever do. But, I mean, that was really a good thing. And very short after, there was the problem of Dubai. Dubai, they wanted planes around there, and that was the position to make a terminal, a shabby terminal. So I had a lot of work at that moment, so I said, I don't want to make a competition, but they insisted, so I said, okay, you want an airport? You'll get it. I proposed to build under the apron. In fact, the idea is not mine. It's the Brasilia airport by Niemeyer was like that. I mean, little things on the top and coming from. This time it's not pop pop pop. It's a full airport. I was just out of making bridges for the planes in Charles de Gaulle, so I had a good idea of what could be done. So I told them, this part of land is just good for parking. Then the terminal will be under, and you get, and the terminal is completely under the planes, and we could. So we made the site. In fact, landscape. Isn't that? Now I must make a pose. That's an airport. And believe me, I've been there, it's like that. It's just Bora Bora airport, there's just a runway. Then you take the boat to the island. Well, okay. The other model is, the Japanese model is, more dense. But yet, he has a great environment. Miami, can you believe Miami is a place of sun and plants and something like that? I've never been in that airport, but I hope I never do. It's terrible. It's terrible. Concrete, buildings. I'm sure we can do better. Tampa tried to do better, although they had an opinion of the architects which we could speak of. But at least it's a kind of green island with too much things in the middle, maybe, but a real try. That's Jakarta, which I'm the father of. Non-expensive airport, they said. And the surroundings were villages. And I proposed to make open structures and not to copy, but get inspiration from the architecture all around. So it's really an untypical airport where you got, at the origin, you could walk in the garden, really. It was open galleries. Air condition was only the waiting places here and those. And that's it. And a kind of village all around. And all the surroundings were planted. Well, Singapore is a place, as you know, for many plantations, but they have done a lot of efforts but the terminals are too big. There's only one green line in the middle, but they expect to do a big extension there, and I'm sure that this garden will take more place. That's something we did in Charles de Gaulle. All those roads there, from the beginning, I proposed to leave alone and ask the people of organizing the forest in France to help me planting. So we planted them all there, and it was respected all the way. And by the way, we had two trees, and that one was more than 200 years old. And it was right on the road, and we fought so that the road would be diverted, and that afterwards that the train on the other side would not come into it. This is only a protection of a train. It's not a protection of if something falls, the train will not suffer. So we saved that tree, and we also tried to make the roads looking. In Shanghai-Pudong, we gave back a part of the water. All this has been gained on the sea, so I propose to have the road coming on water and making also a number of plantations around. Making some efforts for the lighting, and inside the terminal itself, having the view on gardens. When you wait for immigration, it's like this. To be frank, I'm a little bit afraid because there are now works underway, and I'm afraid the garden will suffer. But I hope not. It's such a nice thing to, and I explained. I explained to people how important it was to have a gateway with saying that, okay, the amenities are there. And that was a project in Guangzhou. Everything was green, the parking, the thing. It was kind of green with a road coming on the terminal after the other. Well, at the end they made that. I mean, I'm not sure. See the distance between the dream and this. Okay. But I mean, the landscape, as you know, I mean, can be done of many things. The landscape can be made of roads. Just the roads of Terminal Number 2, over 20, 30 years, we drove the roads in all the possibilities of roads there, and they built a kind of landscape as such. And at the end, I put some trees. But I mean, it can be, and there's a continuous, and that will be also the thing. But the landscape of the airport goes inside the terminals themselves. They're a part of it, and these so big terminals become in fact landscape as such. So, okay, airports, terminal, they have to be constructed with the time. I mean, the traffic increases. You don't build forever. You don't build. They evaluate. But so, let's see very very rapidly how we could address that. So, let's go to airport architecture master plan. New York at the beginning. Units. All the terminals the same. Immediately after, no, everyone in his own garden. And then it came to what you know, TWA, which we pray every day, and the others, and the others, and the others. Well, that's the way. The units become modules, different modules. And it comes to this with a constant evolution of each module, each in his organization, the international, the TWA, the oval. I don't remember which it was. Always at the beginning, there's the temptation to say, I have a good unit and I will multiply. What was at the beginning of Charles de Gaulle, we had that master plan, and very fast we changed to that one, where we said we're not so sure to do the same, and to that one, we're sure we don't do the same, because you never do. It's impossible to repeat after so many years, because the traffic is not the same. Many, many reasons, but it's like the story, you know, like the story of the Taj Mahal. There's a story that another one wanted to make the symmetrical thing, but in black, the other side of the river. No, you can't. Even that terminal number 2 beginning, you see, it was a naive drawing. Unit after unit, we would build a complex. No, at the end, and very happily, we had put the entrance and the exit at the same place, so we could, at each step, really at each step, we could change something. We could integrate that in the design, not foreseen. We had to integrate different modules, different. So at all the steps, and it is a kind of unity through diversity, and in my opinion, it's a good example of what, in the complexity of an airport, but which is a simplicity compared to a town, the open-ended planning, can produce. I mean, making master plan most of the time doesn't work, but making a planning which is open-ended would better work. Dallas-Fort Worth was built on that, about the same idea as the Terminal 2 and a little bit before. I mean, the units, a through road, Dallas and Fort Worth, and units all around, a train delivering It was a great idea, but the module after that took various form. It was also the idea at that time that the terminal could be a line, a simple line in between, and which doesn't work. You need some more concentration. Well, of course, Atlanta. Atlanta could do exactly its program piece after piece, but it's because it's such a peculiar airport. It's not so much of a local airport, but an exchange airport. So it explained completely the form. Now, different types of terminals. At the beginning, satellites, fingers, others, and now more and more and more, getting out of the articulated volumes to big roofs, to speak like the Chinese big roof. Our father. And Rolf Gordon, which were the inspiration of Terminal 1 for me. I mean, I love that project. I think it was bright. I mean, the two roads, the roads coming on the two sides, the parking lot on top, a very concentrated access to the plane on both sides. It was formerly, it should have been 4 like this. There were 2, and they had they lived with difficulty, but they lived. And Tampa was a little bit the same in a way. I mean, the roads all around, full access to the terminal, big parking lot, and this access to different units, but that time with train. And that was the very first application, if I remember well, of that link by a people mover. Well, Charles de Gaulle one inherited of Rolf Gordon and Tampa in a way, except we didn't put trains there. We tried to concentrate, but we made everything to put around all the facilities. Before that, we had what we call fingers, long, linear construction, like in Orly South. But the last of those is Osaka Kansai, the airport piano design, long terminal, 1,760 meters, if I remember well, with a train inside, with people mover inside. Shanghai-Pudong, a little about the same dimensions. Always fingers. And this was a project that was not built, but fingers also in a way. Big roof. For an organization which was criticized with the buses coming on the side, but I mean, fantastic. Again, the Saarinen again. And the big roof of today is Beijing. I mean, the airport as such becomes a landscape. And it's on 3 parts, and it's... So you see that now the units are becoming, and those coming late in construction and in traffic can make very big airports. Since the others had to go step by step and suffer from... here, the development is so fast that you can make those big units immediately. And the same architect, Foster, with Hong Kong. So now the interior space, is it emotion guiding us, or is it banal decoration? I don't want to comment that. You have eyes to see it. Huh? How could they think of all that? I mean, so surely. So I went to that like in the church. I mean, Roman church for me were equal to that. And that is second airport, and it's a simple space all the way. Fantastic. Wolf and Goldman. Okay. That was all articulated pieces, and a connection, and every space has its own. The Charles de Gaulle Airport was really a try to have the scale of the roads around, the scale of waiting rooms different, one material only, but I mean always the space moving around you. If you bigger, little, very little, but in the space. Waiting areas. So, well, but this Terminal 2 was more of roofs. But altogether, you see, there was some always articulation of pieces. Well, of course, a train terminal in an airport has to be linked to the sky. And that was another part. I always wished to have this was the peninsula into the sky. And a floating floor under the roof of glass. I come back to that one. I like it so much. Piano inside, look. Pure respiration, pure breathing. I mean, this decoration, these white things are the ducts, in fact, open ducts for the air condition. And the big volume he did there, long way. Worcester, Hong Kong, with beautiful walls, unity, space. Well, myself, not so bad. Always the same roof with a structure with no diagonal. Again, Foster. I mean, look, this becomes a landscape. I mean, this is a change in the building vision you can have. It's so big that the form does become something else, really something else. It's a construction. It's a kind of sky of space around. As long as you don't come to the limit, the limits sometimes are a little bit, but okay. You remember that one, constructed under the runway. I said that will be the entrance. That will be a column. I mean, 1001 nights structure. It became that. I was not in charge. Became that. And that. I mean, it's horrible. It's terrible. I mean, what can we live? Can we live in that? I mean, I don't think so. So I want to show you a last example, very last example. It's the one I'm very proud of. It's Manila Airport. It's a very simple airport. I mean, with a simple structure, 20 meters, not more, straight everywhere. Look, it can be simple. We don't need to be heroic all the time. And I show you the myth of this poor Ecole. That's the Bruegel idea of it. You look for Ecole, it's there. That one is plowing, that one is fishing, that one is keeping the sheep. They no heroic. It's only that silly guy is there. So there are two images then of Ecole. I mean, it was stupid. And the people don't care. I mean, it could be also the architect at the end, as it was in Dubai, would think. I let you decide. Huh? And I thank you. Sorry, I was a little bit long, but...
Hello?
Sorry. It's difficult to...
Do you want some more?
Oh, yes, please.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was fascinating. And I realized I'd never met Mr. Andreu before, that you have such a calm demeanor, that only a man with such a calm demeanor could handle the obsessive complexities of making an airport, an urban airport, into a human place too, which I think you somehow managed to learn to do at some point. And we've been talking today about figuring out at what point you put it all together. And you're talking about airports like Tampa and Houston, but when you did Terminal 1, to me, the essence of that design that made it poetic, more than just a beautiful piece of engineering and urban planning. Does that work? Hello? Yeah. Was that central moment, and everybody here who is old enough to have gone through that terminal in the 70s, excuse me, will never forget that moment of you're jet lagged arriving from New York, and you come in and you're lost, we always are lost in an airport. We have no idea. As pedestrians, we don't know where we are. And then suddenly you come up from those satellites, you're underground in some mysterious tube, and then you come up and they turn into these transparent fallopian tubes. That's how I always thought of them, being reborn, arriving in Paris. Yeah. And it was always, 7 a.m., 8 a.m., because of the time those flights came in. And to me, it was, and everybody I know of that generation, it was this moment of not only the excitement of the modern age, but very much Paris and very much France. And somehow you'd taken all this methodology and all these ideas that were, maybe some were coming from Saarinen, but Saarinen, his airports were outgrown so quickly. You went and we all worshipped at this temple of TWA and Dulles, but within 5 years, within 10 years, they were really essentially obsolete. The great English critic Banham described the airport, and I think it was Heathrow in about 1962. He described it as a demented amoeba that had no end in sight and had no control. Of course, that's how Heathrow still is, it feels that way. At what point do you feel, you seem to have come fully blown to Terminal 1 as someone who'd had so much experience. What was it you did, and what were you studying, and who were you looking at that allowed you to bring such sophistication in terms of not only urban planning, but the engineering, and then that beautiful poetic, you retain poetry somehow, I think, at all your airports, in that moment in the center where you come and you have that, it's almost like a Piranesi irrational moment in the midst of this incredible rational system.
Well, I always was convinced that architecture is more than construction, and that is what is more is of a degree of symbolism, of poetry, of that it's difficult to define. You don't put that like jam on a piece of bread. It has to sour from inside. But in the same time, I was nearly all my life. I didn't speak too much of that because the people asking me to design airports didn't ask for that. I had the chance to be the designer and to do it, so I didn't speak of it. I said it's functional. It works like that. Da 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 da. I could explain everything functionally. For example, the tubes in the terminal number 1. It is a very poetic thing. And by the way, at the time when we had no computer and nothing of the kind, rather difficult to organize in the space. But I always explained that it was not to make a U-turn. A U-turn in the middle would be difficult. The people would stop and it would be make jams. So in many instances, I've always thought architecture was my secret a little bit. And that gave me freedom to put it inside. But I had to be 100% good on function.
Was it also the bureaucracy of the Aéroport de Paris? Did that allow you more freedom than you think architects in America, let's say, or other countries are allowed at that point?
I had a great amount of freedom, and then, there was also something I did, because people, I mean, some of my friend architects, they say, "Oh well, you had the thing coming to you without any efforts." Yes and no. I mean, I was in charge of the airport, but I had to fight every day with people around me every day, and that was one thing I did, was accepting to be a part of the organization. Right. That is, being every Monday morning for 30 years in the conference room with all the other directors, of course drawing on paper because I cannot help it. They never understood what I was doing, but hearing everything, being informed of everything, and sometimes saying, "Oh, well, this staff problem, why don't you solve it like this?" Just to prove you are there and you understand what's going on. And I mean, it was an organization where the architect could sit with the others and have his word. But a lot of them hated me is also true, because I was saying, no, you don't do that, or no. And as I was the younger at the beginning, and I was from far the oldest at the end.
I've seen quite a few of your early sketches, and they seem to be, you come up with this singular, I don't know if you do those early or you do those after the fact. I assume you do them in the beginning, but very singular, fast sketches of a single form that looks like everything goes into that somehow. And did you use that as kind of an icon that you would show everybody to get through this difficult process of bureaucracy and everything else, or would that come later?
My drawings, which I make, I've now nearly 70 books of 200 pages of drawings. But my work is research, only research. When I know what I want, I stop. And for years and years and years, it was completely my work. I didn't even show them to the people I was working with. I would work and then come back with the people and remake them in big. Again, I mean, because there's no project in which I have not been at the origin of a form. It doesn't mean I did everything. On the contrary, I had a big team and very good people with me. But I could understand only the good ideas of the others when I had worked myself and prepared something. If I had prepared something, I could understand that this one had a better idea than me and that we had to adopt this idea. But otherwise, I'm lost. I mean, it differs. The architects, they react in very different ways. I mean, some architects, they have a fantastic judgment. What's the name now? Rogers. Rogers, he has a kind of judgment. He doesn't draw so much. He sees things. He can correct and think. He's fantastic. Me, I'm lost. I see a drawing on something I didn't. Yes, well, yes. Could do otherwise. Yes, maybe. I don't know. When I've worked, it becomes easy.
What was the big transition you made from that fortress? I think Paul Virilio wrote about the time that you finished Terminal 1. He said the modern airport, as the last gateway to the state, now resembles a fortress.
Yeah. Do
you remember that?
Yeah.
Which I think is true because it's very opaque. I don't think there are no windows on the main bulk of the circle, right, of the Terminal 1. It's all concrete.
The upper part is the parking lot. So
it's the parking lot, right. Right.
There's opening. There's a linear opening, but it looks
like a fortress.
Like a fortress, and then, in a way, it was all the story was leaving the ground for the air. So this building was attached to the ground, and the satellites would open to the air.
But it's also detached because you have this beautiful. I always love that elegant kind of moat. You have a moat of air around it, through which you can see the tubes coming from the satellites, through which you can also see the highway coming in, right? And then there's not a train there, so you don't see the train. But so you are you're disclosing, but you're revealing.
At the end, 20 or 30 years after, there's a little train coming.
There's a little train. So you're enclosing all this space, but you're constantly revealing it, but just in little bits here and there. It's only for, I think, 200 yards or something, right? Where you see the highway coming. But there's an enormous shift in the whole paradigm of how you're thinking about airports when you start on Terminal 2. It's completely different. Instead of this centralized object, which I presume could not be expanded, right? How do you unless you go up, right?
You're right. You could not. I mean, we came to a complexity and a density that you could not make any larger. The luggage system would become crazy. Many things would become really crazy. I tried, and it was an objet célibataire, we say in French. I mean, impossible to marry to anything. And that's it.
She's so difficult, I know.
And
but you told me you went to look at Dallas-Fort Worth, and you met Thomas Sullivan. Thomas Sullivan, for anyone who doesn't know, was this kind of mythical figure who was the master planner of Idlewild, which became JFK. And his original notion was that decentralized, everybody had a different terminal, and everybody had its own identity. It was completely different. It became this kind of World's Fair of an airport more than a defined space. And then he realized that was a complete failure. And so when he started DFW, what he told me when I interviewed him many years ago was that he had seen a television commercial for Hertz Rent-A-Car where I don't know if any of you remember this, but the guy would arrive in the airplane and he would float out from the airplane and into a convertible rental car. And that's the transition. And all the engineers and architects who worked on Dallas-Fort Worth were shown this commercial over and over again, and they were supposed to interpret this. And that was the idea. So you'd have a very short, I mean, it was incredibly short distance between the boarding point and the parking lot at Dallas-Fort Worth.
Exactly. And that was at the same moment that Kansas City tried to do
Kansas
that.
City, very similar with the circular periphery.
The two of them, and Berlin did it also. Berlin, the Tegel did it. And we had the Terminal 2 began like that. But, I mean, you have I know if you read Tintin, and Tintin in Tibet, there's a beautiful airport which was a model. I mean, there's a man, a flag, and a plane, and that's all. That's it. And everybody say, well, why is it complicated with all these things? I mean, put these units one after the other. And it was the time where people believed in multiplication of a unit may do something. But that is a very wrong idea at the end. Because the multiplication of a unit is just a proliferation. When you go to the life, a cell plus a cell plus a cell plus a cell is just a proliferation. Maybe a cancer. If you want an organism, you have to get specialized cells, and more than absolutely, you must have communication between them. Blood, nerves, things like that. I mean, and at the end, what I understood in Charles de Gaulle is that the most important thing was the system linking the terminal together. I mean, the communication between them, people mover, but also information system, but also luggage system, but also, I mean, these were really the organic basis of the airport.
Do you feel it worked? I mean, looking back on it now, do you feel over that 35-year period that the original cellular concept panned out and was effective?
A good deal of it. A good deal of it, but not completely, of course. I mean, it's never completely. And in a way, I mean, the big problem is if you do the exact terminal the people need at the moment, and as you said, 5 or 10 years after, it doesn't work anymore.
It's obsolete. Yeah.
So it has to be, it's like the psychiatric, the doctor saying to the mother, don't be too good mother. Be a medium good mother is much better than the exactly perfect mother which spoils all the à peu près bonne. That's really something you must deal with. It must have a possibility to adapt. Right. If it has too much possibility, it's unorganized. If it doesn't have enough, it will be.
You wrote something a few years ago that really intrigues me too. You said that as you were working, I think, on Terminal 2 and maybe some of the other projects in foreign countries, that you realized time had become a material, much like concrete or glass or any other material, and that somehow that was an element. I think that's a brilliant breakthrough for especially someone working in this highly complex kind of field of airport design, and somehow you were able to keep it all together. What did you actually mean by that in terms of, was it a poetic moment you had after the fact, or would you really consider that as you said, a kind of another material, workable material?
I remember I made a comparison one time of Terminal 2 in its state at the moment and Kansai Airport. For Kansai Airport, I had done the concept, and Renzo did the architecture. But I had done the concept itself. And I compared the two. Same capacity, same length, same number of planes, people movers in the two cases, and I mean forms which are totally different. So I was surprised to find it was so equal. And I was really wondering, but say, which is the good one? And the answer is there's not a good one. There is the one you can build with this time schedule, and this one you can build with this other schedule. But if you try to make the Kansai Airport piece by piece, it absolutely doesn't work. I mean, you cannot make a part of a whole like this and increase. You cannot increase the people movers. I think the Terminal 2 is perfectly fit to what was required at the moment. Not too much money. One company developing and changing his mind. Air France changing his mind from I want point to point very fast to I want to make a hub, which was completely different. So we could adapt and change, and the Kansai terminal, especially with the architectural Renzo, became a wonderful thing. But in fact, he used and we used the time, really as a material. Calling that a material is maybe a poetic license.
When you revisited the Terminal 2 or any of the other projects over time, were you ever shocked at what you'd done 20 years before? Because most architects don't have that opportunity to revisit a project that worked on 20 or 30 years before. And then everything's changed, the technology, the planes have changed. You mentioned, I hadn't even thought of that. Air France is a client. You have to please them. You have to please the Aéroport de Paris bureaucracy.
In fact, I mean, it's plowing always the same field as I did for 30 years or more, even more. It's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, I don't know any of our architects having such a chance.
I don't either.
But in another way, it's a torture. There's everything. Everything bad you have done, you see. And every change they do, silly changes, you see, and you're furious inside, and you say, why? And so, and I fought with the people, and what was, when I went, you know, it's both a big chance and a great difficulty, really great difficulty.
What an extraordinary career in life you've had. Amazing. Thank you. Should we have questions, or yeah? Anybody have a question? Yes.
Hi, thank you so much, both of you guys, for being here. I just finished reading your book, actually, Alastair, which was great. But one thing I wanted to ask both of you was, so in the latter half of the 20th century, the airport increasingly started absorbing all these non-aviation programs to this extent where now people are, it's been kind of bandied around for a while, this idea of the airport city. But of course, it's not an actual city. It's like a simulacra of an idea of an airport urbanism. Or there's an idea that it's in evolution and it hasn't yet become the city that it has the potential to become. And I was wondering what your thoughts were, both of you, about this phenomenon and what the airport would need to either, catalyze itself into like the next phase of evolution where you think it's going. If it's possible even to have the idea of residence or an idea of permanence in the airport, is that something that's possible or even good with all the hotels that are there? I mean, these airports like Heathrow employ tens of thousands of people. And in the past, Orly, for instance, was a destination that people would just go to visit. Like they'd be on the jetty, for instance. There's been lots spilled, but they'd go to the cinema there. It'd be an escape from reality. Now it's not that. It's this place where people largely don't want to be, and they want to pass through without really registering passage. What is your response to this and this phenomenon? Where do you foresee the airport going then, or where would you like it to go?
I think it's done all the things you say. I think the early phase of the airport city was kind of blown away by 1970, with the coming of the jumbo jet. And suddenly it wasn't a place you took your family to go see a movie or have dinner or watch the airplane. Suddenly it was very different. But in recent years, I think one of the most extraordinary evolutions, and Paul knows a lot more about this than I do, or this whole new wave of sort of downtime, this place you're locked into, especially since 9/11 and increased security and surveillance. You find yourself sometimes 4 hours in Dubai or someplace like that. Obviously there's shopping, but there's also, I love all these new yoga rooms and, meditation centers. And Shanghai, for instance, has the butterfly court, where you go and you can get very, zenned out, hanging out with butterflies, which is, I think, the point of that place. And I'm sure have you designed some meditation centers or spiritual centers?
Well, it was quite a story about that, because we had in Orly a place for all the religions. So I began the same in Charles de Gaulle, but I called all the people from the mufti, all the priests, to a meeting, and they were very, very thankful that I invited them, and very polite and soft people. But I understood there was something wrong. So I thought, after a moment, I say, there's something wrong, just tell me. And they say, it's just that in Orly there's the cross. So we cannot go there. It's open to everybody, but we don't go there. So I decided I would make three different places. So, and I don't know. It's most of they do a lot of work with people who travel on a stress, on a people losing members of a family or something like that. They do a lot of work. But to come back to the question, there's two things. There are two things. I mean, I have that kind of vision that, I mean, exploded city. The city has had a tendency to, at least if we look at some cities in France and Europe, to explode and expel parts apart. Airports, go away, you're making noise. Universities, get rid of you. Go a little bit further on. And then shops, big shops, market shops. You want to go by car, go there. And in this explosion, each piece has a kind of memory of a town and has a kind of deception of not being a town. So some of these markets, big shopping areas, wanted to become again towns, building a church or building this or building that. The airports building this and that. But they're fake cities at the end. In my opinion, this exploded city is no longer a city, really. So we have to change really the paradigm or what. And the second thing is, I mean, Andy Warhol was I'm not sure I like his painting all the time, but his thinking I like. He said everything will become a marketplace. Now we have air terminals. I mean, how do you say that? Grand magasin, centre commercial, commercial centers. You have different types of commercial centers. You have the airport model, the railway model. They're all commercial centers now. Andy Warhol is right. The museum themselves are on the verge to become commercial center in which you can see painting. And this is also something which maybe we have to accept as a change, but also that we have to think of. At least I'm not fighting against it, but it's a kind of reduction. Everything, and in all these airports, I mean, to find always the same products for the skin, the face, the fashion, there's always the same. You make 10,000 kilometers to find exactly the same.
Yeah. There's a few places like San Francisco which has been encouraging local, artisanal, food people and beauty products and things like that. Yeah. Do we have another question? Anything? Is that about right? One more? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Over the last 15 years or so, a lot of regulation that impacts the stress that flyers feel as they're going through the airport. So, going through additional security checks, so on and so forth. To what extent has that impacted the way that you design interiors of airport to react to that increased regulation?
That's a great question.
Oh yes, of course. It had a big influence. It had a big influence. I mean, the separation of arrival and departure, which had advantages of having flows which do not intersect each other, was really completely adopted because of that, because of control of the people going to the planes and letting the others get out. It means at a certain moment the airports were a place where you would come across others, see the faces. Typically now an airport is you see the backs. When you arrive, you see the backs of the people. You hardly see somebody coming in front of you. except in the commercial area once again.
Could you have done the central vortex of Terminal 1 in post 9/11? Probably not.
No. And in fact, we had problems. Where shall we put the control? Where shall we put the... And it spoiled a little bit the idea of... but all those controls are spoiling our lives. You know, you cannot go through... I was in the museum this morning, in the U Museum here. I mean, the people cross. It's splendid. I met the opera in Beijing with 2 entrances so that it could be a place you could just cross to avoid walking outside. But the controls, no. Impossible. Closed. Finished. I mean, if reason comes back, I won't see it, but I hope.
Great note to wrap up, I think. Thank you very much, Paul. Excellent.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Alastair Gordon, Paul, Andreu, thank you so much for this evening.